Well, new information today in the search for missing baby Lisa Irwin in Missouri. Her parents telling supporters, the people who have volunteered their time and effort, to stop holding vigils on their lawn. And that is raising some real red flags for some people, including the parents of this little girl. 12-year-old Polly Klaas was abducted from her own bedroom back in 1993, just like little Lisa's parents claim she was. Polly was later found murdered. Her father, Mark Klaas, joins me now. Mark, thank you so much for being here. And I appreciate you coming to weigh in on this because I think it struck a lot of our viewers as very unusual for parents of a missing baby girl, what they say is a missing baby girl, to tell the people keeping media attention on this case, the vigil folks, please go away. We've had enough. We want to get back to normal. You say that strikes you as very odd.
Well, it does strike me as odd, Megan. First, let me just remind people it was actually 18 years ago yesterday that Polly's remains were in fact found. Now, one of the collateral damages of this action of theirs is that law enforcement has closed down some of their investigation. They've reassigned detectives onto other cases, which is the last thing in the world that the parents should want. They should be out there full force advocating for their child, doing everything they can to encourage people to look for their child and keep law enforcement's task force as a full component so that this thing can ultimately be solved. But that doesn't seem to be the direction they want to go.
Now, a source close to the parents tells me that wanted to point out that Deborah Bradley actually helped organize these prayer vigils at the outset, but that her young boys, 6-year-old and 8-year-old, started to feel insecure with the people on the lawn, and they had found that at least one of these vigil attendees had begun using the vigils to spy for the press or funnel information about the family to the press, which led in part to them saying, please don't do the vigils anymore. Does that soften your feeling at all, Mark?
It seems to me, Megan, that these children are being used as an excuse or a justification for not cooperating with law enforcement or not even wanting the public involved. It seems to me that if I were an 8-year-old or if I was a little boy, I would want to do everything I can to help my little sister. I would want to be the superhero that came in and solved the case. I would want to make sure that if I were kidnapped, that mommy and daddy would want to do everything they could to bring me back. But that's not what's happening, and I'm very concerned about what's going on in the minds of these little children. I have to think that they're feeling a little bit abandoned themselves.
What do you make of the family all along has said, look, we cut off contact with the police because it became accusatory, and you know they now have lawyers who are saying, don't sit down with them. They're going to try to use this against you. Does that speak to you as somebody who, you know, unfortunately found himself in a similar position many years ago?
Yes. Well, of course that speaks to me. I think if you're going to be listening to lawyers instead of listening to your heart, you probably deserve to be in a courtroom. The reality is, Megan, is that the vast majority, something like 82% of abduction cases involve a family member. Of course the police are going to be looking at you. Therefore, you have to do absolutely everything you can to eliminate yourself as a suspect. Another thing that's exasperating this case is the shifting stories. Remember at the beginning, Deborah Bradley said that she put the little baby to sleep at 10:30. Now it turns out she was drunk out of her mind at 10:30. The last time she remembers seeing the baby was at 6:30. So instead of, you know, shifting their stories and refusing to talk to law enforcement, they should be demanding that they speak to law enforcement. They should be spending every day with the cops, conferring with the cops, making sure that the cops are following up on every lead and demonstrating to the world that they are their children's best advocate, and we're not seeing that out of these folks.
And Mark, how important is it to keep media attention on the case in a case of a missing child like this, which vigils help do?
Well, I think it's incredibly important, particularly local media. And the reason that it's important is that law enforcement needs an excuse to move on to other issues. They're not well funded anymore. They aren't well resourced as they were even when my daughter was missing. Therefore, it becomes problematic to try to keep a full task force going all the time. One of the best ways to encourage that kind of honesty in law enforcement or that full task force is through media coverage. Get people invested in your child so that law enforcement has no choice but to continue to move forward on all fronts. Now, another thing that's a problem is that, again, given the fact that they have limited resources and they're investigating various investigations, the family investigation, the stranger, the sex offender investigation, the peripheral contact investigation. They're not going to be able to direct the full force of that investigation until they eliminate the various possibilities. And Lisa and, I'm sorry, not Lisa, Jeremy and Deborah are not doing that. Their actions are taking them in the other direction. They're forcing law enforcement to continue to investigate their own involvement in this situation.
Mark Klass, thank you so much for coming on with your perspective, sir.
Thank you.
All the best.